How does the alcohol affect your gut? We are going to find out today. This is James Swanwick. You are listening to Alcohol Free Lifestyle. And today we have a functional health coach as a guest who specializes in gut health. He's based on the Sunshine Coast in my native country of Australia. He tells me he's been a long time listener, not just of this podcast, but of my old James Swanwick podcast show from must have been 2012, 2013 now. And today we're going to be learning about how alcohol affects the gut. And we'll be learning about how it affects stomach acid, the gut-brain axis, how alcohol compromises dopamine production. We'll talk about some studies between alcohol and bacteria, the correlation between alcohol and candida. And we'll be learning some fancy new terms today as well, which maybe you haven't heard before. It's a big welcome to Chris Browning. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, James. It's an absolute, like I was saying to you the other day, it's an absolute pleasure to be here because I've been following you for about 10 years, and I've been delving down this rabbit hole of health for a long time, and you were one of the first people that introduced me to concepts like intermittent fasting that no one was talking about at the time. Dave Asprey, bulletproof coffee, all of those kind of things. So big kudos to you and a big thank you to you for introducing me to that world, I guess, and shoving me down that rabbit hole.
You're welcome, and thank you for the kind words. Just tell us a little bit about you personally, where you're from, where you live, what you do.
Yeah. So if you can't tell from the accent, I'm originally from the UK, but I moved over to Australia. I backpacked in Australia, originally in Melbourne, and after probably about a week of being here, I was like, I'm never going back home. This is the place for me. So 15 years down the track, I'm still here. I relocated to the Sunshine Coast in December, which is obviously your native state. It's a beautiful place. I'm really fortunate, although it is raining today. Why it's a bit dark in here.
and what does a functional health coach do? And you specialize in gut health. So just tell us a little bit about that.
So what we do in the functional health world as opposed to the conventional health world, I mean, the key differences, so I specialize in blood work and blood work analysis. So in the conventional world, what we tend to do is be very reductionist, right? So we tend to just look at one ailment or a symptom and try and treat the symptom. What we do in the functional world is we try and get to the underlying cause. So we're looking at the body as a whole, and the gut is a key part of that, obviously, because that's how we assimilate all our nutrients and everything else. So it's going to be key to feeding the cells of the body elsewhere. So I focus on gut health. But yeah, they're the key differences. And then in terms of blood work, the key difference is I'm looking at the levels of healthy people, whereas in the conventional system, they're looking at the levels of the average of the patients they're seeing. And generally speaking, the people who are going to the doctors are people who are chronically sick already or the elderly, right? So as opposed to that, I'm looking at tighter margins because they're taking off healthy people, so athletes and people like that. So things stand out to me a lot more. Plus, instead of looking at it as one marker at the time, I'm trying to look for trends. So trends, which, bizarrely, when I first came across this stuff, will correlate to what's going on in the gut. You can take certain things, blood markers, and you can correlate that to gut health. So it's really interesting, pioneering stuff. And it's not something you can learn in textbooks at the moment, unfortunately. And I learned, and I know you're a big fan of mentoring, and I learned through mentoring with people who've been doing this for decades.
Okay, so what have you seen in relation specifically to alcohol and how it affects the gut? You've had clients or patients, they've told you how much they're drinking. What's the effect that you have seen in them?
Well, actually, the most profound case I've seen with alcohol in the gut is through myself. In my 20s and in my early 30s, I was a pretty heavy drinker, going to uni. I like to party a lot. I used to drink. I used to smoke. So it was really through my health transformation that I really started to learn about this kind of thing, and I saw it directly from myself. As I mentioned to you the other day, it's almost been 3 years now since I've had a drink. But then in terms of my clients as well, I see things like the liver enzymes and the yeast issues and candida and SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, all exacerbated hugely by alcohol. Even one heavy drinking session can disrupt the mucus of the gastrointestinal lining, which leads to things like leaky gut. So, when people are constantly binge drinking week after week after week, like I was, that can cause some really, intense complications that spread to the whole of the body and the system.
So what are some of the symptoms then of someone who's been drinking too much? You mentioned liver enzymes and candida and bacterial overgrowth. What does that actually mean? Like, what are the symptoms that someone might be experiencing?
So take candida. So I had candida, for example, right? So actually I haven't had a drink for 3 years. 0. But before that, I really started to cut down because I was focusing on my health a lot more. So before that, I really started to cut down on my alcohol. And when I went to get functional blood testing done, my liver enzymes were still jacked. Like they were so high compared to the functional levels. So because what candida does, so it's a yeast, right? So it produces something called acetaldehyde, which is the same thing in alcohol as well. So it's part of that fermentation process. So there's a whole cascade of issues that go on, but directly, this is what causes candida. So even if we're not drinking, even if we stop drinking and we have candida, that's still going to produce that acetaldehyde. That's still going to affect our liver and the functioning of our liver. And there are studies now to show as well that acetaldehyde will actually cross the brain-blood barrier, much like alcohol does when we're drunk, right? It affects our brain. So that can lead to things like neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and things like that, as well as many autoimmune diseases.
Got it. So if someone's got candida, what are some of those symptoms? And just maybe you could just clarify what candida is. I'm aware that it's a yeast infection, but like what it actually is it? Because you've spoken about candida a few times, but to the uninitiated, what is it?
It's basically an overgrowth of dysbiotic bacteria. So one of the most common forms is SIFO, which is small intestinal fungal overgrowth. So basically means we're supposed to house most of our bacteria in our large intestine. But what happens is this bacteria starts to proliferate in the small intestine, right? So when that happens, it means that we're not, because we get our nutrients through the small intestine. So it means that it's interrupting that process, and it disrupts nutrient absorption and things like that. So one of the key things with candida and SIFO, which is really interesting because I didn't put this piece together until I started to dig deeper with it. It actually manifests more often as neurological symptoms than things like IBS, so gas, constipation, diarrhea, and things like that. So oftentimes people will have brain fog, they'll have really poor memory, mood disorders, so anxiety, depression, and things like that. So people don't often put the pieces together that it's to do with their gut health because it's all neurological symptoms, which I found really fascinating.
So brain fog, poor memory, mood disorder, depression. That all sounds pretty fun, doesn't it? And all of that could be coming from drinking alcohol, which affects the gut, which creates the brain fog, the poor memory, the mood disorder, and the depression. But then when you go to a traditional doctor, I would imagine it would be, oh, you've got brain fog and poor memory and mood disorder and depression. You'd best take this pill.
You know, IBS, one of the most common ways conventional medicine will treat IBS is with SSRIs, so antidepressants.
So just to be clear, IBS is irritable bowel syndrome, yeah?
Correct, yeah. So that's characterized by things like constipation, constant diarrhea, gas, flatulence after meals, and those kind of things.
Got it. Okay. You were saying that there are studies that show that alcohol creates a whole bunch of bad bacteria as well. Is that correct?
Well, the most simple way to think about it, right, is that alcohol, has good uses. And one of the good uses for alcohol is as an antibacterial or a sterilization, right? We use it topically. So think about it logically, right? When we're drinking that alcohol, in our microbiome, we host trillions of bacteria. It's literally a world within a world, right? One of my favorite sayings is as above, so below. And that's because we do have a world within our system. And that influences how we behave and things like that. So what happens is when we're drinking that alcohol, that is going to disrupt that our system, our microbiome. So it effectively is going to wipe out that good bacteria, and it's going to leave room for the bad bacteria or the pathogenic bacteria to proliferate, because our whole system goes out of whack and our environment goes out of whack. So in a healthy microbiome, we'd have about 80% of the good bacteria and about 20% of the bad bacteria. And so that bad bacteria can survive a lot more readily in the environment that we create when we're, not putting in our body the things that we should be putting in our body. So it's basically a case of we're creating an environment within our GI tract that will allow that pathogenic dysbiotic bacteria to proliferate. So they become the 80% and the good bacteria becomes the 20% or less. So we go out of balance.
So drinking alcohol destroys good bacteria and fosters bad bacteria.
Correct, because they interact with it a little bit different, because good bacteria, because you might think, okay, well, if alcohol kills bacteria, that will kill the bad bacteria as well, right? But what actually happens is bad bacteria, when it's in a healthy system, it's a lot more transient than the good bacteria. The good bacteria should stick around for a lot longer. So the bad bacteria comes in and comes out. So it's not really affected that much by the alcohol. But what happens is, as well, alcohol is very much linked to hypergut permeability, or you might know it as leaky gut. And that's basically where the tight junctions of the gut become loose. So all the remnants of food and that bacteria start to get into the bloodstream. So what happens is, instead of that bad bacteria starting to go out the way it's supposed to go, it will start to leak into our bloodstream. So that bad bacteria lets off endotoxins. So one of those endotoxins is LPS, or lipopolysaccharides. So it's a protein molecule. And when that gets into the bloodstream, it's pro-inflammatory. So it's very much linked to a lot of different things, but we see it linked to autoimmune conditions. We've even seen it linked to asthma and things like that. And I can send you these studies as well if anyone wants to have a look at them. But yeah, it's just this cascade of issue. And one of the things, I think one of the simple ways to think about it as well, when we think about alcohol and how it affects that digestive process, is a good analogy that I like to use is a waterfall, right? So if there's an issue with the waterfall, the first thing we do is we go to the top of the waterfall to see what's going on. So when we flip that to us, that's what we're putting in our body. So the second thing in the waterfall is the whitewash. And for us, inside our body, that's our stomach acid. So alcohol directly influences our production of stomach acid. So when stomach acid becomes low and we're not able to assimilate the nutrients, that's obviously going to lead to nutrient deficiencies, firstly, but then it's also going to allow that food to putrefy and ferment within the system, which, again, as we talked about, allows that dysbiotic bacteria to proliferate and creates an environment for them to thrive and not the bacteria that we want in there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I know it's a lot.
And is there any particular form of alcohol, or type of alcohol, whether it be wine, dark spirits, clear spirits, beer? Is there any evidence to suggest that the different types of alcohol can cause more problems or less problems depending on what it is?
Look, they're all going to cause their issues. There's no direct study that I know of. There may be one out there that suggests that anything's worse than other. However, just logically thinking, I would say things like beer is obviously because of the yeast content. And actually myself, I used to feel a lot worse when I drank beer than I did things like vodka or scotch. So yeah, because of the process and the yeast within beer, I feel like that's going to be worse for things like candida. And the clearer spirits are generally, the clearer, purer, like things like potato-based vodkas and tequilas also are generally going to be a little bit better for you than your beer and your dark spirits.
Okay. What about wine? Red wine and white wine?
Yeah, I would say that was similar to beer in the process that it goes through. And obviously you've got a higher ingredient list in beer and wine as well. So I would say, yeah, they're pretty much on par.
Yeah. I've been saying this for a number of years. The two worst alcoholic drinks that you can have are beer and red wine. They have the most toxins in them and they cause the most damage. People are horrified when I share that. Sorry, let me say that again. Those who enjoy drinking beer and red wine are horrified when I share that with them usually. Because, you see all these ridiculous studies from the 80s that they're still pushing, saying, a glass of wine a day is so good for your heart and it's all this. But the reality is that there's just zero nutritional benefit. There's no benefit at all. In fact, it's all damaging. And yes, I concur with what you say. My research that the clear spirits like tequila and vodka are the least bad for you. I used to say they're the best for you, but in actual fact, they're the least bad because they're all bad. No amount of alcohol is good for you. Consuming it. The irony is that it's good if you've got a cut, right? Like if you've cut yourself and you want to stave off infection, you would definitely put alcohol on your skin and try to kill the whatever nasties are getting in there. But consuming it and drinking it is going to cause all kinds of problems, particularly beer and red wine. Just on another point, the World Cup soccer tournament, football tournament that was on recently. It was interesting before and in the days before the event started, Qatar banned Budweiser from serving alcohol. And so there was a big uproar because all these fans from Western countries wanted to come in and drink alcohol during the game, but they put a ban on drinking alcohol. I think it was an hour before the game, then the game, and maybe an hour after. I think it was like 3 or 4 hours you couldn't drink alcohol. And then they replaced it with 0% beer. So Bud Zero. And I'm wondering if 0% beer or 0% wine still causes these kind of problems, or is it just the alcohol in the beer and in the wine that causes the problems?
It's a really good question. I would say it would absolutely still cause issues, right? Because it's when I talk about that waterfall analogy and what we put in there, that includes everything that we're putting in our mouth. We need to be conscious of everything we're putting in there. So I'm a big proponent of, organic, non-processed foods as a good start. So when we're looking at the ingredients of zero beer, I'm still guessing it's highly processed. There's still a big ingredient list in there. And whilst, again, it might not be as bad for you as the alcohol content, I'm not sure what the acetaldehyde content would be in non-alcoholic beer and wine. But I'm guessing, it's like with decaf coffee, right? You still get a little bit of caffeine in there. So it's probably 0%, but it's probably going through a very similar process. That would be my guess, but I couldn't tell you definitively. But it's really interesting that people are in an uproar, right? Because we see beer as this manly drink, right? Particularly in the UK where I'm from, everyone's drinking a beer and it's a really manly thing to do. But actually beer leads to lower testosterone.
Yeah.
And what makes us a man is testosterone, right? So that's something, a point that someone brought across to me the other day. So, it's very interesting how people see it and how it's being marketed to us, right?
Yeah, it's fascinating how many people think that just because you're drinking, 0% beer, that's not going to have some kind of issue or create some kind of challenge. So it sounds like if someone's really trying to get off alcohol and alcohol is the issue, then of course you're going to be better off drinking a 0% beer like Heineken Zero or Bud Zero. But that's still going to cause probably some gut problems, right? It could still probably cause brain fog and irritability. Yeah, you're not consuming the alcohol, but all the other stuff in it's not great for the gut, which can still cause a lot of irritability and anxiety and stress and fogginess and all of that kind of stuff. So it's a good distinction to know.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up as well, right? Because even, just avoiding the issue isn't fixing the issue, right? And that's one of the important things that people have to realize is even though I stopped drinking, I still had to go in and fix my issue with candida. I still had to go through the protocol of doing that. I still had to take antimicrobials and fill those nutrient deficiencies to really and get to the crux of the issue. Our body is amazing and it can heal, but we have to put it in the right environment to heal. So yes, I'm really glad you brought that up.
Hi, this is Victoria English, Senior Coach at Project 90, the program that helps high achievers stop drinking either temporarily or permanently. If you're an executive, entrepreneur, investor, physician, or other high achiever and know you're drinking too much, if you know your current drinking habits are compromising your sleep, relationships, health, and your happiness, and you're ready to finally get your drinking under control by quitting for either at least 90 days or 1 year, you are invited to apply to become a Project 90 client. Our 90-day and 1-year programs involve a safe, fun, yes, I said fun, private virtual community of high achievers with a process that boasts an incredible 92% success rate of clients reaching at least 90 consecutive days alcohol-free. Applicants can apply for an introductory interview by visiting alcoholfreelifestyle.com/Project 90. You'll likely speak directly with me or one of our other coaches. Are you ready to stop for at least 90 days? Are you ready to stop for at least 1 year? If so, we can help. Application interviews are limited and are conducted on a first-come, first-served basis. If there are no remaining interview times available, wait a few weeks and try again. Schedule your 15-minute initial application interview by visiting alcoholfreelifestyle.com/project90. Let's get back to the show.
It's interesting, because when I eat super clean, and by super clean, what I mean is I might go 3 or 4 days in a row where I only have eggs for breakfast, like a big egg meal, and then I might have steak, maybe some vegetables, but maybe I'll just have a big piece of steak. Or I'll eat eggs for breakfast, or I'll have I'll have half a chicken, and maybe I'll have some vegetables, but maybe I won't. And I'll just eat that, and I might drink a protein shake a couple times throughout the day, right? So I exercise, eat some eggs, drink lots of water, and then have a big steak meal or a big chicken meal, not necessarily with vegetables, but sometimes with it, and a couple protein shakes. I will sleep so well that night, and I will wake up in the morning and I feel so much lighter. And when I use the bathroom, I'm not backed up. Sorry to get specific here, folks, but it's just, my bowel movements are regular. And I've got greater energy, greater clarity and focus. I don't have that irritability. And then when I start adding some things to it, like if I had steak and chips, by chips I mean, maybe like some hot potato, like some potatoes or fries, I guess is the way I'm saying it. And some of the sides, like the salads, which has got some particularly nasty dressing on it, or I get blue ranch or whatever, or maybe I might have for example, last Sunday I was watching some NFL football in a bar, and I went, bugger it, I'll order some chicken wings. I haven't had chicken wings in years. Let me have some chicken wings. I'm just going to eat the chicken. It's just chicken, right? I'll be fine. I ate the chicken wings. I can only suspect that was probably cooked in some really nasty sunflower oil, and that the flavoring of it had like a bunch of sugar and some other nasty stuff. I mean, I don't know. I ate those chicken wings. Man, I felt terrible. Like it was tasty going in, but pretty awful, sitting in there and digesting in my system. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's actually really, really, really simple.
Mm-hmm.
If we just eat clean and don't put in crap, we feel good. But yet we have to have all of these endless podcast interviews like we're doing now, and books written and TV shows done, like reminding us about what we already know, which is don't eat shit. Don't consume shit. It's pretty damn simple. Yet the fact that we even have to sit here and have a lengthy conversation about all the stuff that's going on when we consume this is just perplexing to me. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, there's a couple of things that come up to me there. I hope I don't forget them. But the first one is, when you're talking about eating meat and animal-based products rather than, the vegetables that we deem as healthy. And I'm not saying that vegetables aren't healthy for a lot of people, but it actually reminds me of another study that I came across recently where they had 2 control groups, all had IBS. They fed one a low-fiber or zero-fiber diet and one a high-fiber diet. And it was actually those in the zero-fiber diet that normalized their bowel movements, because we associate high fiber as healthy for our gut, right? But that's really problematic for a lot of people, depending on what's going on in the gut, because if they have a bacterial overgrowth, that fiber is feeding that bacteria, and that's what's causing the gas, that's what's causing the IBS. So actually a zero fiber diet is better for a lot of people. And you may have seen the carnivore movement now, which is massive. Look, I'm not a fan of extremes on either side. We're all different, right? And we all have different needs. Like we have our DNA, which we're predisposed to. But in my opinion, what's going on in the gut is going to predispose, is going to be more important than what's what our DNA is telling us to do, because that's what's going on right now. So even if we're, like myself, right? Like I'm pretty lean. I've always been pretty lean. So really I should be on kind of a, mid kind of carbohydrate diet. But because I had candida, and candida feeds off sugars and carbohydrates, it meant that for me to actually treat that candida, I had to go on a really low carbohydrate diet. And until I fixed that candida issues, that's when I could start to introduce carbohydrates back in. So, when people talk about blanket nutrition and, this is the best thing for everyone, it's all BS, right? Like we have to look at that individual person. And, and vegetables, I'm definitely lean more towards meat, animal-based diets than I do vegan diets. I'm not saying that you can't be healthy on a vegan diet. I think some people can, but I think for most people, we do better off meat-based, animal-based diets for sure. That's how we've evolved as human beings. And then the other point what you touched on was around why can't people just eat clean? It's really simple, right? Well, I came across another study the other day. I sound like all I do is sit in and read studies, but I do read a lot of studies. So this study actually did a brain scan of a guy. So it was on a TV show, actually. So they did a brain scan, and they saw that it actually changed when he was eating processed foods and sugars. It changed the composition of his brain. So in the same way, like with addiction. So, it's not as simple as just don't eat that processed rubbish food, because it's actually changing how we think. It's changing those processes of the brain. And companies, corporations, or cartels, those food corporations, cartels as I like to call them, they've known this. They know the science. They know what they're doing. They know we are addicted to certain types of foods. So that's why they do it. So I think it's really powerful for people to know that, because it means that then they can actually take their brains back. Do you know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Look, I know how I feel when I eat certain foods. And what I have come to the conclusion I've come to is a better way of saying it, is that I genuinely feel better when I eat a mostly meat-based diet. And if I just eliminate all vegetables, I actually feel amazing, which is completely contradictory to all of the nutritional advice that we've got. And also, when I eat lots of eggs, I feel really good. And it's so interesting because I was telling my mother, Jill Swanwick, back in Australia the other day when I was catching up with her on a phone call. I was saying, get this all-you-can-eat eggs buffet where I'm staying at the moment. I was temporarily staying somewhere. And the first thing she said was, what's your cholesterol, James? I'm like, oh, God, here we go again, which is conventional, traditional warnings, right? But then there's so many studies that show that eggs are absolutely fantastic for you, and not the egg whites, but the whole egg, including the yolk. And that just saying it's not good for your cholesterol is actually not, well, a lot of studies suggest that it's not actually a worthy warning, because you've got to, well, I'll let you explain it. I'm not the expert, Chris.
I think this is something that I'm really passionate about, right? Because when I went to conventional doctors, the only thing they would say to me is that your cholesterol is too high and your LDL is too high. So that got me down a real rabbit hole on this, right? Because they wanted to put me on statins at 35 years old, healthy, good weight. As far as they were concerned, all of my other blood markers were intact, fine, but they saw my cholesterol and they wanted to put me on statins, right? Well, I've had DNA testing done as well. So one of the things that I carry, and I won't go too far down this rabbit hole, but one of the things that I carry is a gene polymorphism called ApoE4. So it basically will affect how lipids are carried through my system, right? So my cholesterol, my LDL, will naturally be higher than most people. It's an evolutionary thing. It means that as an advantage that I'm less susceptible to parasitic infections. So it was one of the first early mutations. About 25% of the population has it. So I told them that. They didn't know what ApoE4 was to start with. Secondly, I was like, okay, well, let's do a calcium artery score then, because that will tell me exactly what the buildup is, the calcium on my heart. And if that's high, then okay, there might be a time to bring in statins, right? Because statins have some really undesirable side effects. So, but they wouldn't do that for me, right? This was about 5 years ago. So the other thing to remember as well is cholesterol, right? Cholesterol and LDL are very different, right? We create between 70 and 85% of cholesterol endogenously, meaning that we create it ourselves in the liver. Only 15 to 30% of cholesterol is created dietarily, so through our diet, right? So firstly, when we've got high cholesterol, does that mean that it's from our diet? Not necessarily, right? LDL is a different thing that can be correlated to diet. But a lot of people don't even think LDL is connected to heart disease. And there's a lot of good studies showing that it's not actually correlated to heart disease. So there's a study in Korea. It's called the Korea study. It was done over about 10 years with over 1 million participants. And they actually found that people with higher cholesterol were less susceptible to all-cause mortality than low cholesterol. And logically, why is this, right? Like, we need cholesterol for fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin D. If our cholesterol is low, ironically, in the conventional medical system, they don't have a barrier for low cholesterol, just high cholesterol, which is really low. In functional practice, we do. So I see a lot of people who have low cholesterol. And when they have low cholesterol, guess what? They've got low vitamin D. They've probably been on SSRIs, so because they've struggled with depression, they've struggled with anxiety, vitamin A, vitamin E, all fat-soluble vitamins that we need cholesterol for, right? And it's really a case with cholesterol. So the link with cholesterol and heart disease came from one study, I think it was in the 1960s, right? And they found that people who died of heart disease had high cholesterol, but that's because cholesterol comes to the rescue, basically. So it's a really powerful antioxidant. So when it sees something's wrong in the body, it naturally spikes. So it's a case of mistaken identity with cholesterol. And that's why it's high. It's because it's trying to come to the rescue. It's like if an ambulance comes to the scene, a scene of an accident, you blame the ambulance for what's happened at the car crash. You blame the ambulance for the car crash. So, I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's something I'm very passionate about. And only about 6 months ago, and I eat a very meat-based diet, so really high in saturated fat, right? And I actually persuaded a doctor to give me a coronary artery score because I can't get that privately. And guess what? I have a score of zero. So basically the arteries of a baby. And I've been eating a high-fat diet for 10 years.
Yeah. I mean, I understand why people get confused on this stuff. But I still don't know. I mean, I don't even know what's right or wrong these days. I just like listen to people's opinions. I trust my own body, at least how I feel. And I feel pretty damn good when I'm eating a mostly meat-based diet and eating lots of eggs and not much else. I can tell you I went through a phase where I had a lot of desserts for a while, and I would have like a frozen yogurt or a late-night snack or something. Ugh, man, I was about to say I put on so much weight. That's not true. I could just feel belly fat growing. I didn't need to test it. I didn't need to do a pinch test. I didn't need to do a proper body fat test where you sit in a machine or whatever. I could just tell. I could just tell. I'd put on jeans and I could just tell if there's even a slight change on carrying a few extra pounds around the waist, just from a couple of weeks of having a seemingly innocent kind of dessert at the end of the meal. I mean, I still exercise a lot, so. But yeah, it's amazing when you stop drinking alcohol, you stop eating shit, and you just eat clean, drink lots of water, focus on your sleep, move, get some movement, go outside. Man, things can turn around very, very quickly and profoundly without the need for hospital visits or doctor visits or getting on medication and all that kind of stuff. That's my view. It's not, I must say, my parents come from a completely different generation. They're almost 80 now. I share this stuff with them and they're very skeptical, because they come from a generation of trust whatever the doctor tells you. And the doctor's still telling them to eat like grains and not much meat and not much. I mean, it's just, it's just changed. They also come from a generation of when the government says jump, they say how high, especially in Australia where they accept that every elected government official tells them as gospel and fact, So if the Australian government says do this, they'll say, okay, yep, you've got to do that without question. And whereas I'm more of like the questioner type, It's not to say that I'm anti-government, but I would say I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical of medical advice that comes from government.
How dare you question the science, James? How dare you? The science is the science.
Yeah.
That's what science is, right? It's questioning. That's how we get to good science, by questioning everything. That's what people don't understand.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, this is a podcast. I'm interviewing. We question, right? We question and we test things. I think that's what I'm getting across. I'm not necessarily saying that just because a government tells you something that it's not true.
No.
But I think I have the right to question it. And even then, there's probably going to be 100 studies supporting it and 100 studies not supporting it, the opposite. So it's at some point you just got to go, well, what is the truth? What is truth? Then we go down a rabbit hole of just going, well, what's your truth?
And that's exactly what you're doing, right? And this is what I'm a big proponent on, and this is what I try and do with my clients, right? So I work with my clients quite intensively, and I do that for a reason, right? Because I don't want to be like a doctor. I don't want to be like a normal naturopath even, where you go for one appointment and that's it. It's like that analogy, give someone a fish and they'll eat for a day. Give someone a fishing rod and they'll eat for the rest of their lives, right? So I'm teaching people how to do this for themselves. So I take them from the ground up, right? Because it's all about finding what works for you. And we're so like exactly what you say, we're so convoluted with all this information. But we're so unique, like our microbiome is like a fingerprint, right? There's no two the same. So we have to figure out what works for us. And you're doing it the exact way, right? Because you're questioning and you're trying things yourself. And your body is smart. It will give you biofeedback. If you're giving it the right things, you'll know because you'll feel good. If you're giving it the wrong things, you'll know because you'll feel bad, right? So we have to, and we've lost all intuition with things like that. And we have to take that power back. And I feel like that's what I do with what I provide to my clients, is giving them the power back. I don't want to work with my clients forever, right? I want to work with them. I want to give them the tools, and I want them to know how to do it for themselves, because that's how we create a better world, right? Because, you know, when my client goes out and they completely transform their lives, people see that and people want to know. And, you know, when we're in a good mood and when we're feeling good, we're nicer to other people. We're not as stressed, you know, we don't. You know, when we feel rubbish and when we've got brain fog and when we're stressed and when we're not feeling good, that's when we're short with people, like our family and things like that, right? So I think when we look after ourselves and we put ourselves first and we put our health first, it really does have a ripple effect on the rest of the world, in my opinion.
Thank you, Chris. Where can we find out more about you and what you do?
So, look, my main port of call would be my Instagram. So it's coach_Chris Browning. So CHRISBROWNING. And my business is called the Human Optimization Project. That's something that, you know, came to me, you know, when I started down this journey, and then it took a while for me to conceptualize it. But yeah, so the Human Optimization Project, but my Instagram is coach_Chris Browning.
All right, Chris. Well, thanks for sharing your expertise with us today on the cold, hard facts of how alcohol affects the gut. And then we got into some conversation around cholesterol, and then a meat-based diet or a plant-based diet. So I really appreciate your guidance and expertise here.
No problem. And again, thank you so much for having me on, James. Honestly, you've made such an impact on my life personally, and I'm sure for, you know, thousands of others as well. So thank you for all you do, and please keep up the good work.
You're welcome, and thank you for your kind words, like I said before. Thanks, Chris, and thank you to you, the listener, and we will catch you on the next one. Take care for now. Rating the show, writing a little one-sentence summary, and posting it. That would be so amazing. Thank you. Likewise, if you would like to schedule a 15-minute exploratory call and apply for our Project 90 program, then you can do so by going to alcoholfreelifestyle.com/project90. If you'd like to get the free guide, that is the Alcohol Freedom Formula Guide, you can go to alcoholfreelifestyle.com/guide. Our YouTube channel is at alcoholfreelifestyle.com/YouTube. You can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at @JamesSwanwick. Thank you so much for listening. We so appreciate you, and we'll catch you on the next one.